Our customers are companies like OpenAI, the Washington Post, Under Armour, ASICS. And what all of these companies have in common is they want faster web products and they want to build them faster. But with AI, we're seeing even a further acceleration of the desire for customers to leave the data center, embrace the cloud, and start iterating and embedding AI into everything they build. So now that's become a thing that Vercel is known for throughout the world.
But generative AI represents an opportunity for them to really kind of leapfrog everything.
It not only do you catch up, you can even outcompete.
Hey, Guillermo, thanks for joining us today. We're super stoked and honored to have you on our podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited as well.
So Guillermo, as you know, we're here in Japan, and our audience, our network here at Geodesic is kind of an eclectic group. Definitely some developers, some people who are more technical, but also a lot of people who are on more the business side of things, digital strategy, digital transformation, IT strategy, but definitely all people who are very interested in what's happening in technology and have some level of influence and responsibility for their digital strategies at the organizations that they work at. And so we're really excited to learn more about you, to get your insights into what's happening in IT, especially with front-end development, which is a huge area of interest here in Japan now. And of course, to learn more about Vercel, your company. So, thanks so much, once again for spending time with us today.
Yeah, I'm psyched to speak to your community. And Vercel does a lot of work in Japan, and we have a lot of customers there.
Absolutely.
As you mentioned, a lot of developers know us.
Yep.
But what matters to business people is that we make their online presence really fast, and we make their development teams really efficient. So every major company today cares a lot about their digital footprint.
Absolutely.
So Vercel is at the heart of enabling that digital transformation and making the web really a great platform for our customers.
Yeah, and that's a huge topic, as I mentioned, in Japan. Can you maybe just take a minute to describe Vercel and what it is that you guys do?
Yeah, when I started the company, Vercel, I had previously sold my startup to a company called WordPress. So the parent company, WordPress, also very popular in Japan.
Yes, very popular.
And while I was there, I was very excited to then leave and start a new company because I am a serial entrepreneur. I'm always having ideas, etc. So I didn't actually know what I was going to build. But when I left my first startup, I set out to create a website to say, hey, I'm in business. Come to Vercel, right? And I noticed two things. So I wanted to create a web presence using the latest web technologies that were open source at the time. So React had just come out, Meta had open sourced it. And then Kubernetes had just come out, Google had open sourced it. And I'm an expert front-end engineer who had been working on web technologies for, at that point, nearly 20 years. And I had sold a company, so I wasn't new to the world of software engineering. But it literally took me weeks just to stand up one page using these great technologies. I felt like I needed to take a PhD. And of course, this page was, using sophisticated technologies. I wasn't just using a drag and drop website builder. I wanted to deploy an application that is the best practices of software engineering. And when I was faced with that problem, I realized it was going to be a gigantic opportunity in streamlining the deployment to the cloud. I knew that every company in the world, if it was hard for me at the time, imagine for all of the companies in the world that in the years following, were going to be interested in the cloud and in moving their workloads to the cloud. And at that point, I wasn't even thinking about AI. But with AI, we're seeing even a further acceleration of the desire for customers to leave the data center, embrace the cloud, and start iterating and embedding AI into everything they build. So now that's become a thing that Vercel is known for throughout the world. Our customers are companies like OpenAI, the Washington Post, Under Armour, ASICS in Japan, Nintendo. And what all of these companies have in common is they want faster web products and they want to build them faster.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, as I mentioned, that's a huge topic in Japan right now. Everything UI, UX, I think Japanese traditionally have been very good with technology, but they understand, I think, especially at an institutional level in Japan, that they're a little bit behind with UI UX, right? Really thinking through user experience and really creating compelling user interfaces for their products. And that's what you guys do, right? You remove the complexity of leveraging and implementing all of these cutting edge technologies so that the engineers that you do have can really focus on user experience, the user interface, right? And that experience that is actually going to impact their customers, their revenue, new businesses, etc.
That's right, because in order to have a production application on the internet, you have to hire so many different people. You have to hire the infrastructure engineers. You have to hire the back-end engineers. But really what matters most to the customer, to your customer, is the user experience, right? They don't care what raw materials you use. You don't get, there's no prize for who built the best cogs to run the machine. The real barometer is the customer experience. So Vercel was created as a company with that front-end engineering DNA. I was building the best platform for myself. I've always been on the customer experience, the UI, the UX side of the equation. And I wanted to conceive a platform that completely automated away all of the other parts, the infrastructure, the tooling, the frameworks. All of that is just on autopilot when you use Vercel.
Yeah, that's amazing. And can we take kind of a step back? I know you're used to talking to a lot of hardcore developers in the US, really cutting edge people. I want to take a step back maybe for our less technically oriented audience members here in Japan and talk about the web a little bit, because when we talk about the web, that meant one thing 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I've heard you talk a lot about the incredible innovation that has happened on the web and some of the amazing things that are capable now, which I think, if you're not at the cutting edge like you guys are, sometimes I think we kind of forget, like, well, okay, what does it mean to create a website? It means something totally different today than it did, even 5 years ago. So can you maybe just walk us through like what the web, means today, like at that cutting edge, the opportunity that I think is there given all of the advanced functionality that's available nowadays?
Yeah, the biggest transition that has happened to the web is that it went from being a static document rendering mechanism. It was basically, here's some documentation for my BBS, or here's how I publish some paper out of a university. Now, the web is the richest, most fluid, most dynamic application platform on the internet. The stepping stones to get there have been innovations like what's happened with Gmail, with Google Maps. But even most recently, when you think about AI, the killer app of the AI revolution, ChatGPT, started out as a website, right? You would go to chat.openai.com, and that website is actually built with a framework that Vercel created and is known for, which is Next.js. So that framework that I was involved in creating, I was actually the original designer, was actually exactly for the service of this idea that the web can actually surpass even the best mobile native applications. The web is not just for like black text with blue links. It's dynamic, it's personalized, it's interactive.
Yeah.
And that's what Vercel as a platform enables companies to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, 15 years ago, I was at a company that got bought by Adobe. So I was there for a little while. And even at that time, just 15 years ago, they were selling CD-ROMs in boxes, and you had to go down to an electronics store and buy one if you wanted to use the latest version of Photoshop. It's amazing that wasn't too long ago. After that, I was at Apple, right? And when I was at Apple, the big thing was, native apps. Like that's what Apple was pushing. But all of that functionality now, that sophistication can just be recreated on the web itself. Like you don't even need, to think about, the limitations of, whatever hardware your customers might be using.
That's right.
Because
it's universal.
It's universal.
It's free.
It's free. Yeah, it's amazing.
You own your space on the internet, right? Like when you register a .jp domain name, that is a long-term, durable guarantee for your business. And I've always been super skeptical of building on other people's platforms, right?
Yeah.
And your domain is yours forever.
Yeah.
And the freedom that you have to innovate within that domain name is, I think, what makes it web so unique. But to your point, traditionally, it's been seen as a lesser medium.
Yeah.
And people have not really caught up to all of the innovations that web browsers today are shipping.
Yeah.
It's frankly a miracle what you can do with modern web technologies.
Yeah, and I think in Japan, Japan, to be honest, maybe is a little bit behind what's happening in the U.S. And so I think a lot of companies maybe haven't or don't realize the power and the sophistication that is available, just through the web. But as you were saying, there's a lot of complexity there. So the sophistication is there, but it's complex, right?
That's right.
And Vercel, and even before Vercel, through Next.js, right, the open source project that you pioneered, removes a lot of that complexity. That customers, especially enterprise customers who need, highly performant, personalized, and secure websites can go to Vercel or use the Next.js platform and really access all of that sophistication and that power in a way that's really efficient for them and allows them to kind of, to a large extent, ignore the complexity and just focus on the user experience, right?
Yeah, imagine having a framework that is really easy to learn. You can learn Next.js in a couple days if you have some programming experience, but now with our AI-based, basically tutoring technologies, we have a project called V0. You can go to this interface and you can chat with our AI. You can pick up Next.js really quickly. And what's amazing about it is that you're picking the same framework that powers the largest websites on the internet, like Walmart and Nike and ChatGPT and Anthropic's Claude. So the access and the democratization power is unbelievable, right? The fact that you can just pick up the same tool that the greatest companies in technology in the world are using is, I think, to your point earlier, if you feel like Japan is behind, open source and the cloud are going to bring that equalization. In fact, a reason that we're popular in Japan with developers is that they pick up our open source technology so quickly. You go ask around at your office, like, hey, what technologies are you excited about? Sometimes they master the open source technologies we put out faster than our own employees. You see all these blogs in Japanese, we translate them, and they're on it. So there's a lot of pent-up demand. And I think something you and I have talked about in the past when we've done the Geodesic Forum is sometimes it's important to listen to those developers that are in the field, in the day-to-day, because they know the answers. But they need a platform that allows them to channel that creativity. And that's where Vercel comes in, because Vercel empowers the developer. They don't need to ask another team to provision some servers. They don't need to write up a document. Please let me, create a demo here or a prototype. They can just do it.
Yeah.
So that's really the power of Vercel.
Yeah, that's so relevant for Japan. I mean, developer productivity is literally one of the most urgent and important kind of business issues that Japan is facing as a country. Just because digital is so important, but they have such a shortage of developers, which is kind of I think, the situation in a lot of countries, but certainly extremely acute here in Japan. So Guillermo, you mentioned a couple of your customers, and I looked through a lot of your customer case studies, and it's just amazing, kind of the breadth of things that your customers are doing. You mentioned Walmart and Nike on the e-commerce side, and as you mentioned, some of the
ASICS,
biggest, most active e-commerce sites on the planet are entrusting kind of their business to Vercel, and that's amazing. One of the case studies that I really found compelling and I think might be relevant and eye-opening to a lot of companies here in Japan is the Chick-fil-A example. Chick-fil-A isn't here in Japan, so Japanese probably don't know what kind of an amazing company it is. They consistently have crazy long lines for their chicken sandwiches, right? And, I've stood in those lines, so I know what an amazing company it is. But their application was supply chain.
That's right.
Obviously, they're not selling chicken sandwiches online, but delivering ingredients in the quantities that are required to each store they have thousands of stores across the United States to make sure that they have the product to deliver to their customers. That is a logistical kind of mini miracle. And
that's right.
The platform that they use, right, is all, is based largely on Vercel also. And so I thought that was a really, really interesting use case.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that, because when I talk about user experience in creating great web applications, it doesn't always mean that you have the highest traffic website on the planet, right? Like Chick-fil-A, for that specific application, they're only serving internal company needs, but they still need to move extremely fast and accurately and improve the efficiency of their employees, because to your point, their goal is operational excellence to deliver consistent quality in every restaurant. And that's such a great example of how technology and software is even disrupting areas of industry that you wouldn't expect. Like, why does the JavaScript framework, Next.js, how does that help deliver better sandwiches? Well, it's because it makes your company more efficient. So it's a great case study. We're very proud of it. We also happen to have a restaurant chain in Japan. It's called Sukada Nojo. So we have a lot of examples of when you go and order online, also increasing the conversion rates of those customers, because when you give them a better experience, they're more likely to love your brand. They're more likely to return and become loyal customers. They're more likely to not, to actually go through with it. Like sometimes people, when they shop online, they're not like fully committed.
Yeah.
So if it's faster and delightful, they buy more.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the other end, you already mentioned you guys are working with companies like OpenAI and Runway and some of these companies that are really pushing the envelope, right, and leading the generative AI revolution right now. And those companies are also entrusting their front end to Vercel. So I was just wondering if you could maybe just spend a little bit of time talking about, how those interactions are going and how how generative AI is changing kind of UI UX in general.
Yeah, there's this concept that we've helped pioneer. We call it generative UI. Because LLMs are remarkably good at converting unstructured data into structured data. And what a user interface is fundamentally is a tree representation of UI components, right? When you go to a website, what you're looking at first is you're looking at a top-level document, and inside of it, you're looking at a layout. And inside a layout, you're looking at the navigation. And inside of the navigation, you might have a button. So that structured output is something that LLMs, the large language models of this AI revolution, they're just exceptionally good at creating. So Vercel, being on the front end side, we've perfected all the techniques for rendering highly complex and highly dynamic user interfaces. So amid this sort of AI revolution, it was a natural place for all these innovative AI companies to build their products. So for example, Perplexity builds their product on the Vercel platform.
I love
Uh,
Perplexity.
it's
It's an
fast, right?
amazing,
Like so,
yeah,
like
it's amazing.
that's what our technology enables.
Yeah.
Runway is another example of a company that is iterating extremely frequently, right?
Uh-huh.
Like they just launched a new model that has certain capabilities that weren't possible, even just a few months ago.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And the competition in the AI world is
Mm-hmm.
so intense. So our platform is enabling these companies to also iterate very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
The best practices of AI products, the patterns of UI of AI products are also evolving very quickly.
Uh-huh.
Just today, OpenAI announced Search GPT. And this is a new UI. So you search,
Yep.
and now the links are sort of on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side, there's a stream of content. So
Uh-huh.
these companies are just reinventing these user interfaces almost every day. And Vercel is one of those platforms that can help you keep up with change.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's so much change. I was wondering maybe, Guillermo, if you have any thoughts on like where is kind of UI UX headed? Like, what is it going to be in 5 years? I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, is that something that you think about, or are you just kind of like, going with the flow? Because
No,
things
I
are changing
think,
so rapidly.
yeah, I think there's a major, major disruption coming.
Uh-huh.
We're sort of contributing to it because we created this product called V0.
Yes.
V0, you can go to v0.dev to play with it.
Uh-huh.
And what this product does is that you talk to the AI,
Mm-hmm.
and the AI helps you create a user interface. And what this is doing essentially is it's letting anybody in the world create software. You almost don't need to know how to code, right? And what's exciting for me is that while Next.js is easy, you still need to know a lot to be productive. It doesn't feel quite as accessible as, for example, Microsoft Office did to the personal computing revolution. So with AI, we now have an opportunity to enable the entire world to create software. So you can describe the requirements of your product in natural language, including Japanese. And you can say, for example, I want to create a login screen that offers logging with Google and logging with Yahoo Japan. And then you're going to see that V0 can stream and generate that UI and give you the code for it. So you can take it and then make it your own. So what I love about V0 is that it's still enabling the human craftsmanship and input. It's not just sending it directly into the customer's hands. So you're still involved in vetting the output. So I think the next 5 years, we're going to continue to refine these artificial intelligences that give human beings superpowers. But there's certainly a potential future in which writing the code and even generating the code is not necessary anymore, right? There's a world where every interface that you interact with is fully generative based on your intent and the available data and context. The example that I use is that our coffee machine here at the office in San Francisco, it has a very bad UI.
Uh-huh.
They didn't put a lot of effort into it. They
Yep.
obviously at the time they didn't have AI.
Yep.
There's no designer that is obsessing every day over like what is the best way to like give you a menu with options for coffee. And that's one of the examples of how I think like that UI will be completely AI rendered in the future. There's just no reason that anybody should bother with like, it's inconsequential. It's just a means to an end. And AIs will just continue to self-improve. They'll remember your context, your preference. Maybe they'll make that option larger. Maybe they'll give you more contextual information. They'll be multimodal, so we'll be able to operate it with voice. They'll understand our reaction. It'll be a constant stream of bidirectional data. But before we get to that future, I think there's going to be a lot of incremental steps that, you just build better software faster with the help of AI.
I love that coffee machine example because Japan traditionally has been more on the hardware side.
Right.
And that's why they're trying to catch up with software. But I think the big opportunity and the big threat for Japan is actually the merging of hardware and software, right?
That's
Where
right.
traditionally these two worlds have kind of, you know, moved in parallel, but now they're merging, right?
That's right.
For example, with autonomous driving in vehicles and things like that, right?
That's
And
right.
so you have a lot of really incredible hardware products in Japan that do have what you just described, like not a great user interface, you know.
That's right.
But generative AI represents an opportunity for them to really kind of leapfrog everything
That's right.
and just rethink user experience and the user interface from the beginning. You know,
That's
given
right.
the power of generative AI and, you know, its ability to do what you just described, which is just to, you know, listen to people, to take multiple forms of input and then translate that into, you know, what they want, whether it be a coffee machine or, you know, a car or some whatever else, right? Whatever else.
That's right.
Yeah.
And a lot of the skills that people were accumulating in their heads. For
Uh-huh.
example, I spent so much of my years obsessing over padding and border radius. Like I know how to design a rectangle that looks good. I just have that intuition from just looking at so many user interfaces and creating so many over my years. But an AI is a perfect statistical machine. An AI already kind of knows because it's looked at everything. It knows what is a good user interface, right? So to your point, it is a massive leapfrog opportunity. We are already seeing that in Vercel, in that the cloud, for many companies, they knew it was the future, but it was just too hard to migrate to the cloud. And in fact, I met a lot of companies in Japan that told me that. They're like, well, we have data centers. You know what I mean? Like, we like the idea of the cloud, but it's just the idea of how much code I have to rewrite is just it's too much. So with Vercel, we're having a lot of companies that are telling us that they're going from the data center straight to the cutting edge of the cloud because we automated it all. So they didn't have to waste time over the last 10 years of like doing the painful DIY migration, creating Kubernetes clusters. So every one of these revolutions is a leapfrog opportunity. It not only do you catch up, you can even outcompete.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and that is an amazing transformation, and I think a lot of Japanese companies have intellectually, you know, they understand that, and they're just really looking for the tool sets, you know, the companies that are going to help them actually make that transition. And so I think, you know, Vercel is an obvious, you know, place for every company to look. I want to actually step back a little bit and talk about open source, if you don't
Yeah.
mind, because I
Yeah,
know open source
one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, it's one of your favorite topics, and I love the way you talk about open source, and you've been a massive contributor to open source across your career. And Vercel itself is built not entirely, but a lot on open source, especially Next.js, right, which is the front end framework that you created. So, what role does open source play, I guess, you know, to you personally, but, you know, more broadly, kind of philosophically, in technology? Like, why is it so important to all of the innovation that we're seeing today?
Yeah, on a super philosophical level,
Mm-hmm.
information wants to be free.
Hmm.
We should all collectively be learning from the best practices and ideas and talents of everybody in the globe.
Uh-huh.
So open source is just a faster self-improving system. It's very hard for a framework to be better than Next.js if it was closed source, because we're constantly embedding all of the lessons that are coming from our community and our ecosystem. So it's kind of like the super philosophical foundation. The other one is the ecosystem. So you were talking about people want to hire the best people into their companies, right? And if you have a proprietary framework that you built, let's say at your, you know, large bank or car manufacturing company, a lot of those companies did make the decision to build homegrown frameworks and tools. And then they have a very hard time hiring or motivating new people that they hired to do their best work. Because when they work on their side projects, when they go to meetups, when they learn online, they'll be using Next.js or something like that, right? So the ecosystem and the talent pool that an open source framework can create is incredible. And the other dimension that's really important is the business flexibility. Vercel is a hosting solution for Next.js that completely streamlines its deployment. And it's, of course, it comes from the creators. So it's, to use a metaphor from the days of Git and GitHub, Git is like Next.js and GitHub is like Vercel. So you have like the perfect counterpart for the open source technology. But also with Git, you can do Git in many other places. You can do Git with GitLab, you can do Git with Bitbucket, and that's how Next.js also is. So you don't have to use Next.js with Vercel. You get freedom to move the workload wherever you want. So those are like the underpinnings of why open source is so important to us.
Yeah, I just wanted to cover that a little. I think philosophically, open source is a difficult thing for a lot of Japanese companies to wrap their brains around. Japanese like, things that are proprietary, and that's kind of the traditional Japanese model, right? But it's incredible how through open source, you get like everybody kind of wins, right? The software itself, because of the community, because of the ecosystem, as you mentioned, there's so many eyes on it. It improves at a rate that would be almost impossible to sustain with a proprietary system. But then you also have the opportunity to build a great business on top of that, right? And so, the software is great. You can still build a great company and a great product on top of that. But customers have, like you said, endless flexibility as well. And so everybody's kind of winning. And it's just an amazing kind of movement, I guess, that's been happening over the last few decades. And it's just fascinating to see kind of like the latest iterations, continue to just prove out this, incredible kind of, mode for innovation.
Yeah, and maybe to give you a very concrete example of why the ecosystem advantage of open source is so important. Let me give you like a very concrete example of how one of your listeners could use Vercel. Vercel powers the storefront, the digital storefront for companies like ASICS. But Vercel is the user experience layer. What we host is sort of like the entry point, and we render the UI and we show the products and we're fast and we enable personalization. But the data and the backend of the operation can come in from anywhere. So for example, in the case of ASICS, Next.js and Vercel integrates with Salesforce Commerce Cloud. So it actually provides a very incremental adoption journey for companies. And without open source, it would also be very hard because think about all the different technologies that companies have already purchased or they use. It's nearly infinite. So open source helps the community write a lot of those integrations and best practices. A lot of the agencies and system integrators that we partner with in Japan help us build those integrations.
Yeah.
And they have a much easier time because the software is open source.
Yeah. And the bigger the community gets and the more use cases you guys add to the community, the more development happens, and organically it just grows, right? And so
that's right.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Thanks for kind of diverting there, more of a kind of philosophical angle, but still, has a lot of relevance to what you guys are doing, specifically at Vercel. So I really appreciate that. Guillermo, I know we're running out of time here. But I just wanted to, thank you, first of all, for spending this time with us, helping us understand a little bit more about what's happening at the cutting edge of this kind of UI UX revolution, combined together with this AI revolution and some of the amazing technologies that are happening, both in open source, with Vercel, and especially how customers are actually leveraging this technology. So thanks for sharing that with us. I wanted to share with our listeners that Vercel is, already making some significant investments in Japan through the support that you are offering both in Osaka and in Tokyo, right? You have people doing support. And I know they're super busy because we talk to them once in a while, supporting your growing customer base here. You mentioned ASICS, obviously a really big Japanese company. There's another company, DNA, which is kind of one of the more famous digital native companies here. And they have a streaming application that's based on Vercel. So we know you guys have a lot of traction here already. And, just
there's
really
also an incredible system integrator and agency that is very active in our ecosystem called Chot. And they build, for example, a website called Alba, which is the largest golf news website in Japan.
Okay.
And they deliver it through Vercel, and they use Next.js to build it. So there's an incredible community of experts already in our technology, as well as Vercel experts that can help you build all these amazing experiences.
Yeah. And so, Guillermo, if people want to find out a little bit more about Vercel, if they want to know a little bit more, the best place probably to go is just to go to your website, right?
Yeah, Vercel.com.
Yeah, Vercel.com. Right. Ton of information there. Developers can just go there, get started with the software.
Yeah. And another interesting entry point is if you go to Vercel.com/templates, in the spirit of open source, we've open sourced a lot of incredible starting points for your next idea or for your next migration. For example, we have Vercel Commerce, which is an open source storefront, really, really high performance storefront. We have a ChatGPT-like template. So if you want to create, imagine if you wanted to create an AI chatbot for your own data and with your own expertise, you can clone that template. So there's just a lot of different templates and a lot of different integrations with technologies. And last, you can also go to Vercel.com/experts to find those agencies like Chot that can help you build new projects on Vercel.
Thank you. Incredible. I know we just barely scratched the surface today, but I hope our listeners got an idea of what it is that you guys are doing, being just one of the core vendors enabling this UI UX revolution and this artificial intelligence revolution. So I hope they go to the website, and dig in a little bit more, because I know there's a lot more there. So thanks again, Guillermo, for your time today. It was super good to see you get caught up, and hope to see you again soon, maybe here in Japan.
See you all soon in Japan. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Guillermo.